Things Wednesday of the month. Happy March, everyone. We have three more scheduled after tonight's that are showcasing the 2025 conference presenters. And then after that, by next winter, we'll start featuring some presentations from the 2026 conference that we had this past January. I guess with that, I'll pass it over to tonight's presenter, Angella Moorehouse.
All right. Well, I can't see anybody, so hopefully this works out. But please holler if there's something that's going wrong. I'll try not to talk too fast. So I'm Angella Moorehouse. I've been a field representative for the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission now for 30 years. So my job primarily involves land protection, defense of our easements, management, such as prescribed fire, and doing a lot of inventory work, which is my favorite. So about 10 years ago, I got really into insects. I've always used a camera to do butterfly surveys and to photograph plants, but I had a couple of interns that were doing bee research. And so I really got into kind of combining my love for photography and plant ecology with all the insects that were visiting the flowers. So I kind of went hardcore into insect photography, and I really haven't stopped since then. So this is a collaborative effort with Casey Carter from the Natural History Survey. She's a pollinator biologist. And basically, I collect a lot of the field data with my photographs. I'm documenting the insects and the flowers they visit. And Casey basically takes my numbers, my raw data, and tries to crunch it into statistical analysis and come up with some information statistically on the associations between insects and flowers. So in 2018, I started a long-term project. I wanted to basically know a lot more about what's going on as far as pollination on some of my nature preserves. So I basically started visiting 6 sites per year with a plan of visiting 30 sites in a period of 5 years and then repeating. So I visit six different sites every year, 4 times a year for about an hour or so. I just got to walk a meandering transect, hitting as many flowers as I can, photographing as many insects as I can, and recording all the different species of flowers that they visit. I want to record all the different associations that are happening, and I basically upload a lot of these to iNaturalist for help with identification. So here's a map of my sites. So like I said, do you see that MRSHCG? Those are 2 nature preserves right next to my house. So that's essentially where I live, which is across from the southeast tip of Iowa and the northeast tip of Missouri on the Illinois side, on the Mississippi River bluffs. So all these other sites are some that are protected in the nature preserve system that I do visit, every 5 years. For the total of 30 sites. In 2023, I started doing the replicates of the every 5-year studies. And I just started using a voice recorder. So I basically use Google Voice Recording. I have a lanyard around my neck. And so my phone basically dangles at my chest. And so I talk into my phone for about an hour. I'm really not good company when people come out on my surveys with me because I'm talking to myself for about an hour. But that's how I basically am now able to record every single interaction that an insect has with a flower. Whereas previously, when I was using these just kind of a notepad and just kind of scribbling whatever I could write down, I would have to drop my notebook to pick up my camera and take pictures. But previously, I could only record the different species of plant that was visited by each type of insect. So all those slash marks or the number of that insect, but I wasn't able to record every single interaction. So sometimes there's obviously a preference. So a brown-belted bumblebee might visit, common milkweed 20 times. It might visit, Carolina rose once, but that would each be, essentially visiting Carolina rose and milkweed. I would show that the fact that there's a preference there. So now that I'm doing voice recorder, I can actually show all the different interactions, which is pretty cool. But there's a ton of data now that I am collecting because of that. I hope this is. Okay, so this is basically the bipartite network analysis that KC did. We did this just for true bugs, so Heteroptera. Essentially, I did a flower bug book a couple years ago at the end of 2023, and so I was really interested in the true bugs and all their different floral associations. Now, the number of true bugs is a lot less. So there's like only 46 species of bugs here, and there's somewhere around 80 to 90 different flowers. So this basically just kind of connects through all these little squiggles. It basically is drawing a line to connecting all the different bugs to the flowers they're visiting. So you see these black bars there. The bigger the bar, the more of them that were actually encountered and visiting, different plants. And so all these are scientific names, but Phragmata is the jagged ambush bug. Cormorliana is ebony bug. Lygus is the tarnished plant bug. So those were the most common bugs that I encountered. Origeron strigosus is daisy fleabane. Pastanaca is wild parsnip. Unfortunately, that's a non-native, but it really is heavily visited by bugs. So here's a close-up again showing the big bars and showing the association with ebony bugs and tarnished plant bugs and daisy fleabane, which is really, you can see that big gray bar that connects the tarnished plant bug with Origeron, which means a lot of tarnished plant bugs were actually going to visit daisy fleabane, even though tarnished plant bugs were perhaps visiting 40 different species of flowers. They really, if there was daisy fleabane out there flowering, they preferred to visit it. And that's what you can see through these networks. Like I said, I've been doing the data collection with the phone for the last 2 years. So I have all these interactions. So 9,600 individual interactions of all the insects, not just the bugs. We tried to crunch those numbers to see if we could look at the whole big picture, and it was too much. It basically crashed the computer, so we can't do that. We have to break it down into subsets to look at the different groups rather than the whole set, which doesn't give you a full picture, because if you want to know what's happening from the point of the flower, you want to know which ones are visiting that flower. And so we kind of have to split it up to see what's going on. But for those 2 years, I had 566 different insect taxa, which is species, if I can get it to species or as close to what I can get, and about 200 flowering plants. I'm up to almost 300 plants for the whole survey, but just 200 in those 2 years. So instead of showing the bipartite network analysis, which is so complicated, I can't give you a whole picture of what's going on with all of the different suites of insects, I thought for this I would highlight just a couple of plants that are probably the most important in each season, so spring, summer, and fall, and just discuss some of the bugs that visit them and how important they are. So here's just for a little bit of background. Here's the breakdown for species richness. So it shows that bees, beetles, and flies, when it comes to species, are represented in about the same number of species. Now that's a little off because bees are really hard to identify based on photography. So a lot of the bees may be just listed under one genus. There might be 40 different sweat bees, but they're all listed as Lasioglossum because I'm not able to identify them to the species. Although I'm trying, they're getting a lot better. AI on iNaturalist is getting better. There's a lot of experts that are learning techniques for some of them, where some insects have to be dissected. Their genitalia have to be dissected, or you have to count all the different antennal segments to be able to get it to species. So that's the best I can do. Now on the right is the number of individuals. So those are actually the number, and you can see the bees by far are the best pollinators. So there's far more bees out there by numbers. The beetles are still really high, but that's mostly because of the goldenrod soldier beetle, which is extremely abundant. So you go out on the goldenrods in the fall and there will be hundreds of goldenrod soldier beetles. So that kind of skews the beetles. Whereas wasp went way down. So wasps were 15% by species, but only 5% by the number of individuals. Most wasps are solitary, so there's far fewer seen. So I may only see 1 or 2 individuals of each species of wasp. So there's a big difference between those two numbers. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is why do insects visit certain plants? And a lot of them have to do with the presence in the environment. So the abundant ones can be visited a lot more often. And of course, the ones that offer easy access to nutrient-rich nectar, and especially pollen, because pollen is where the protein is. So especially for bees, which actually require pollen and nectar, usually in a ball, together to feed their babies, to allow their babies to develop, have to have, high protein pollen. Same thing with a lot of times butterflies. We're finding out that the regal fritillary butterfly, if the female has good high protein pollen before she lays her eggs, the survival of those eggs and larvae is much higher. Based on that protein content. So protein is king on that. Now, why are they visiting? Another thing is floral scent, color, and the basically how can they get access to them if the floral structure. So if it's a tube-like flower, you may have to have a specialized mouth part or tongue to stick down into that floral tube. We're finding out that flies tend to like, I know flies like putrid things as well. I mean, they'll go to skunk cabbage and things that smell. I don't have skunk cabbage in my survey areas. So I see flies on white and yellow flowers, usually flat topped, not deep, tubed flowers, but white and yellow is there's certainly a high preference. Bugs tend to like mints. I think part of that has to do with the smell. Carrots also have a smell to them. So perhaps it's an olfactory thing that these bugs are attracted to. But when it comes to mouth parts, I just kind of wanted to show quickly some of the different pollinators and what their mouth parts look like. So with these bee flies and the skipper butterfly, they have that long, either long proboscis or long little tube that can actually get into the long tube flowers and get to the nectar or pollen. On the top left is a true bug, that's a broad-headed bug, and he's got this four-jointed, stiff proboscis that basically retracts underneath the belly at rest, but it's basically a little stabby thing. And so he can't really bend it. He basically has to stab. So he can't get it down into the different flowers. And the beetles on the bottom, they basically are doing a lot of chewing. They have small little mouth parts. They too can't get inside a deep tubed flower. So here's just a chart of the preference of plants. So goldenrod is by far, this has been updated to this last year. So goldenrod this is 8 years of data. 181 species of insects are visiting the common Canada and tall goldenrods. I didn't split those two apart, but those extremely common in the environment, and they offer a lot of pollen and nectar. So they're obviously going to be visited a lot. Now, there is 5 here that are non-native, undesirable plants that we wish we didn't have in our natural communities, but the insects like them. One of the reasons why they like them, obviously common dandelion on the bottom is just one of those abundant flowers that's available in the early spring when few other flowers are out there. But Queen Anne's lace, poison hemlock, and wild parsnip are all in the carrot family. And again, the carrot family has easily accessible nectar and pollen, so it's easy for all different types of insects to visit them. And unfortunately, they are abundant in the environment as well. There we go. Okay, so getting into the different types of flowers that are highly desired by insects, spring beauty is just basically one of the really important early woodland wildflowers. Here in West Central Illinois, we have a lot of deer damage. So the deer have gone through our woods, and we have lost almost all of our trilliums. Bluebells are scarce. There's hardly any Jacob's ladders. There's just a lot of diversity that's gone. But for whatever reason, spring beauty hangs on. I think part of it is because it has this long floral season. It's a small little plant. The deer just seem to overlook it. And so it's been able to maintain, even in heavily degraded, heavily grazed areas, you still find spring beauty in the woods, which is really important because that flower has always been important for insects. And so insects are able to adapt when they at least have something out there. So just to show you some of the bees, wasps, and ants that visit some of these flowers. So the one in the middle is called the spring beauty mining bee. Now, mining bees can be identified. It looks like that bee, if you look close to its eye, has like an eyeshadow on it. That basically is, just a little mark there that basically shows it is a female mining bee. So the spring beauty mining bee does prefer spring beauties. So it's really good that that one still has its host plant out there. So there's a few beetles, early arriving beetles that will visit spring beauty, the pink spotted lady beetle, and then the other one is a soldier beetle. There are a lot of flies. Now, flies fly early because flies are able to basically be active before it gets 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So a lot of times on these cold spring days, cold, wet spring days, when nothing else is active, the flies will be out there. I've been seeing flies this last week. Temperatures were getting up a little bit, but they can essentially fly sometimes when it's 30, 40 degrees. It's amazing that flies will still be out there. So even when we can't get the bees, they don't like to fly until it's about 60 degrees. The flies are able to do it. So the flies can help us pollinate our fruit trees and things like that when the temperatures get cooler. Fragrant sumac is another really important one. Now, a lot of times we overlook the shrubs when we're thinking about our plantings. because obviously shrubs are a little bit sensitive to fire, although fragrant sumac tends to be a little bit aggressive, and sometimes fire is what keeps it in check. But when it comes from the perspective of insects, fragrant sumac is really important because it has a long blooming time and it blooms really early. So it can start blooming around here in March. And in some areas, it continues to flower through May. So it has this long flowering time that provides nectar and pollen early on. So there's a lot of bees and wasps and even ants that will visit fragrant sumac. The one on the right is a polyester bee, the unequal polyester bee, a really cute, fuzzy little thing. But I really just enjoy the flowers are so small, you wouldn't think anything's visiting them, just like daisy fleabane. But if you start looking a little closer, you'll be amazed how many things are out there. So there's a lot of butterflies, skippers, and moths that will also visit it. The Olympia marblewing is on the bottom right there. That's kind of a conservative sand prairie butterfly that we always like to look for in the sand prairies.
That's pretty.
Flies. So the tack-ended flies, the one on the bottom left, I call it the puffhead fly because it's got this great big huge head. But the one in the center is also a tack-ended fly. So kind of an interesting group of flies. The green bottle fly on top. A lot of flies will visit fragrant sumac. And then the true bugs as well. So there's the tarnished plant bug, which I mentioned on the lower left. There's a stink bug. This is a special stink bug. It's not very common. I call it the pink edged because it has pink around the edge on the bottom right there. Jagged ambush bug is actually hunting from that plant, but jagged ambush bugs will also feed on nectar. Whether they're just sipping on a little sugar, I don't know, but I do see them feeding on nectar. Golden Alexander is one of my absolute favorites because it is so easy to grow and it's a good companion plant to all of our prairies. So it starts to flower throughout almost all of April and into May. So a lot of times you've got at least 4 to 6 week flowering period where it's actually being actively visited by insects. So this is really long floral time. This stink bug here is a specialist on golden alexanders and rattlesnake masters. It likes members of the carrot family. So it basically rears its young on carrot plants. So I really love saying, and they're pretty little stink bugs. So I like seeing. I plant lots of golden alexander, mostly for this bee in the center. That is a golden alexander mining bee. Again, it kind of has those. You can see like the eyeliner around the eyes there. So these mining bees, I planted a ton of golden alexander in my prairie to try to attract them. It took me about 7 years to get this specialist bee to find my yard, but now I have lots of them. And I get a ton. I'm not sorry I have golden alexander because, like I said, in the middle of summer, you can't hardly find that plant anymore. Other plants grow up around it. It still produces seed. It still survives. It's just a good complement to your prairie. A lot of different beetles. That one in the top center is called the rhubarb weevil. It's actually big for a weevil. Just really cute little things. They will play possum on you when you try to photograph them. If they see you or they think you see them, they will basically fall. A lot of times they'll fall to a lower leaf and they just stick their legs up in the air and pretend to be dead. So they're kind of funny looking. So there's a lot of different moths and butterflies that also, usually small ones, that visit golden alexander. Again, these flowers are really small, so they tend to attract smaller insects. Different flies. So that one in the top center is called a signal fly. So it basically uses those wings to signal its mate. And the one on the bottom is a picture wing fly. It does the same thing. It has those dark colored wings that they use as paddles to signal a mate. I don't see those two flies on very many flowers. So it's really interesting that golden alexanders will attract so many different types of flies that don't typically visit a lot of flowers. So it's just another opportunity for me to photograph more species. A lot of different true bugs will visit. The one on the bottom right is a small milkweed bug. They will visit other things to feed on. Actually, that's the false milkweed bug. False milkweed bug is a specialist on oxeye false sunflower. And it likes those yellow flowers. So until the oxeye false sunflower blooms, which is usually in late May or June, they will come to other yellow flowers. So these are all visiting for pollen and nectar. A wild bergamot, also called bee balm, it's extremely, extremely attractive to a bunch of different insects. Being called bee balm is obviously a reason for that. The bee in the middle is called Monarda flat-faced bee, and that is a specialist on Monarda or wild bergamot. I don't see these as much in central and certainly not southern Illinois. It's more of a northern species. So when I go up to Joe Daviess County, Rockford area, they can be a lot more common up there. And further north, Minnesota and Wisconsin have a lot more of these bees. I did photograph this one in McDonough County, so near Macomb, which I was pretty excited. That's as far south as I've ever seen them. But it definitely has this flat face and always visits Monarda. So there's a few beetles. Again, the beetles don't have the proper mouth gear to be able to get down into those tubes to get at the nectar. So what they're doing is feeding on the pollen. So the pollen is at the tips of these flowers, and so they're just chewing on the pollen. A lot of times beetles can be messy eaters. They basically chew up the petals and the leaves, just chewing on things, and so they're called messy eaters. A lot of butterflies, skippers, and moths have those long, of course, long tongues, so they can reach into that bergamot without any problems. So a lot of swallowtails, skippers, great spangled fritillaries, they will visit bergamot. And here's a couple of flies. Again, the flesh fly on the left is just going to be checking out the pollen there. The bee fly on the right does have that long proboscis, so he can stick his little mouth parts down into there and get some nectar. I just love that photograph because I love the little feet sticking out. So bee flies are just so much fun to photograph because they're just...
Yep, I agree. Bee fly.
So a bunch of different types of bugs. And again, these bugs do not have, these are true bugs. They don't have the ability to get down into those tubes. So what they have to do if they want nectar is they have to basically stab the base of the floral tube to sneak the nectar. So that's called nectar robbing or stealing nectar. But that's what they have to do to get it. Lead plant, I don't have a lot of lead plant in a lot of the areas. You know, there might be on the tops of the hill parade in one small area, but my entire route is not going to have a lot of lead plant usually. But when I do have lead plant, it is really extremely attractive by a bunch of different insects. So especially bees and wasps. The bee in the center is a lead plant specialist. It's a type of resin bee or leaf cutter. Do you see that orange pollen underneath its belly hairs? So that's where it's basically storing the pollen that it'll go back to its nest and provide for its babies. Bunch of little beetles, so longhorn beetles. What's great about lead plant, it has this beautiful orange pollen, and so you can actually see what insects are picking up that orange pollen and moving it from flower to flower. So it's always neat to see the different colors because sometimes the pollen color is really different than what you visually see on the plant. For example, winged loosestrife has bright neon green pollen. The pale purple coneflowers have there's two different species now based on the color of pollen. And so I always look at the pollinators to see what color they have. Lead plant is also really important for different moths specialists. And there's a hair streak butterfly. So that moth in the center is called the lead plant flower moth. So that's a Shinia. That is pretty rare. At some point in time, that's probably going to need to be listed as state threatened. It's only found in our remnants. So I took that at Revis Hill Prairie. They've been looking for them the last few years. I haven't seen them for a while. I've seen a few of them at other sites, but I haven't seen them at Revis recently. So I'm really worried about that species. It's a beautiful little species. It's amazing how well it blends in to the lead plant. I mean, it just really is hard to tell. You have to look really closely at all the different lead plants to find it. So while a lot of bugs aren't necessarily feeding on lead plant, it's used a lot by the bug in the center is called a bee assassin for obvious reasons. It kills a lot of bees. So it prefers to hunt on lead plant. And so I don't know that it's spreading. It's possible that it's spreading pollen accidentally by getting the pollen on its body and crawling around on the different plants. But it definitely is taking some bees too. So that's kind of antagonistic for it. Milkweeds. Milkweeds are really important for that whole list. 115 species of insects will visit milkweed. But a lot of them are not getting exchanging pollen for the milkweed. So if you've heard, the milkweed has pollinia, so these pollen packs. And if you look at that picture of those ants, you can see on the feet of those ants, they're picking up some of that pollinia. Now, I don't know if the ants are strong enough to transfer that pollinia to another milkweed flower, which is what it needs to actually cross-pollinate. But there's a lot of bees, the big bumblebees, the big wasps, that are strong enough and able to basically get that stuff on their feet. They don't want to, but unintentionally the plant tricks them, and they basically take that to another milkweed flower and pollinate the milkweed. Once in a while, you'll find dead honeybees on milkweed flowers. They have gotten stuck in the pollinia. So they get their feet stuck inside the flower and they can't get loose. And so they die sometimes. And I'm sorry, but I'm not real sad about that. A honeybee is a domesticated chicken, and I care about the native bees. So here's a bunch of scarab flower beetles. The ones on the left here are rose scarabs. That one on the far left center, that looks like a Japanese beetle, but it's not. It's actually a very close relative of the Japanese beetle, but that is one of the native sand chafers or June beetles. So that was taken in a sand prairie. So cute little fuzzy things. These are definitely really good pollinators. A bunch of different types of flies that are visiting milkweed. And again, some of the smaller flies aren't pollinating, but they're just kind of drinking some sugar water. A lot of butterflies. Really, I love whenever I do my butterfly surveys in June, I go straight to the milkweeds to look for things. The regal fritillaries that do come out, the regal fritillaries, that pretty orange one with the big white spots, that's a state threatened species, and they're only found at a few locations, mostly sand prairies. And a lot of times the common milkweed is the flower that's out when both the males and the females emerge. So the males emerge a couple weeks before the females, and they're looking for girls. And so the males will come to the milkweed plants looking for the girls. And hopefully they find a mate, because the males don't live very long. They only live about 3 weeks. So there may be 1 week of overlap when the males and the females are both alive and able to mate. So it's really critical that they find each other, or else we don't have more regal fritillaries. So there's milkweed bugs. So the one in the center is a small milkweed bug. It has a single heart on its back. So that false milkweed bug that I showed you on the golden Alexander has 2 hearts stacked across each other. The large milkweed bug on the upper right is a little bit bigger, but it has basically a central black band across the middle of its back. That is the large milkweed bugs. Both of them have to have milkweed seed pods to basically rear their young. But they both feed on different types of flowers, not just milkweeds. Mountain mint is one of my absolute favorites. So besides golden Alexanders, this is the other one I encourage everybody to plant, because mountain mints, doesn't matter which species, mountain mints attract a ton, 134 species. So we don't go out and plant Canada goldenrod. That one just pops up anyway. We don't go out and plant daisy fleabane, same thing. That just kind of pops up. But slender mountain mint, another one, is really, really fine seed. It's easy to collect. It produces a ton of seed. It germinates readily. And like golden Alexander, it's a good companion plant. So it doesn't crowd out other species. And so it basically works well with its neighbors. So there's a lot of different wasps, especially, that will visit. Some of the bees that are shown here actually look like wasp, but wasp is a really good place to find wasp is on these mountain mints. Beetles, again, the flower scarab beetles, look how hairy they are. They're making more beetles. Fireflies will visit mountain mint, and this is a wedge-shaped beetle with that beautiful bright orange antennae. Lots of different types of flies. You can see the white-footed mosquito there in the center, Midas fly in the lower right. A lot of flies really, really enjoy and are attracted to, again, that smell, I think, of the mountain mint attracts them. Lots of different, especially skippers, a lot of skipper butterflies, hair streak butterflies, really appreciate mountain mints. So I'm always amazed at the diversity I find on my mountain mints. And again, same thing with true bugs. So that one in the center there, that's the large milkweed bug because it has a band across the center. There are several true bugs that actually lay their eggs and rear their young on mountain mint. So always in the late year, I'm out collecting seeds, and I'll find a ton of the little baby nymphs out there on the mountain mint seed heads that are drying up. And so I have a hard time collecting seed because I don't want to kill my babies. I don't want to give my babies away. So it becomes hard for me. Rough blazing stars. So there's a bunch of different blazing stars, but rough is probably the most important of the blazing stars just because of its timing. So a lot of the other blazing stars will bloom in June and July when lots of things are blooming. Rough blazing star is a late bloomer. It's blooming in August. One of the very few bright purple flowers, along with things like ironweed, that are blooming. And so it provides a lot of pollen. This is actually, this bee right here is a male American bumblebee. So American bumblebees are one that are species of kind of concern because their numbers have been declining. The males love blazing star and thistle, field thistle. So if you have those species, you will almost always have this, but they are declining. So it's good to know where to look for them. A lot of leafcutter bees, which is on the center and left. Those are the leafcutters, which basically, again, they collect the hairs on their bellies. So that's how they take it back to the nest. The one on the lower right, we call it a chap-legged bee sometimes. The males have long antennae, so they're called longhorn bees. But really, the females have these big, it looks like leg warmers on their legs. And again, that's where they're collecting their pollen. Bunch of different butterflies and skippers. At this one site that we had recently burned, within an hour, I counted 234 species of silver-spotted skipper, which is that top one in the center. They were all visiting rough blazing star. It was getting ridiculous. I was counting like 20, 40, 60. I mean, they were just all over it. So it was hard to get an accurate count when they're in that kind of numbers. Very few flies, beetles, and bugs visit blazing stars. I don't know why. It seems to be, again, I guess maybe it's the flower shape, maybe it's the flower color. But I really see, butterflies and bees and wasps on it more than anything else. Again, there's the goldenrod. I have 168 species because I did this a year ago, and so I haven't updated that. But it's actually 181 now. And I'm sure this year I will have more species to add to goldenrod. So the bee in the bottom center there is a goldenrod specialist. That's the goldenrod polyester bee. I just love this one. It's pretty rare. I actually took that one over in Iowa, but they are found at a few places in Illinois. It's another one that's a species of concern. Just don't see them very often. So goldenrod is special for some of the rare bees as well. Beetles. So two of these beetles, the one in the center and the top right, are longhorn beetles that actually are wood borers. So the one in the center is a Amorpha beetle. The larvae actually feed on a false indigo bush, which is basically lead plant bush. And then the one on the top right is a black locust specialist. So the larvae feed on black locust, obviously not enough. But both of the adult beetles will come out and visit goldenrod. They're both, as adults, goldenrod specialists. So it's kind of interesting how both the larvae and the adult have two different floral needs, or plant needs, I should say. A lot of different flies. Of course, then again, everything visits goldenrod. I don't imagine if something's going to visit a flower, there's so much goldenrod out there and it produces so much pollen and nectar that's easy to get to. Everything comes to visit it. So there's a lot of moths, especially, that I don't see on flowers very often. Kind of the center right is a grass veneer with a long snout. I've never seen that on any other flowers besides goldenrod. It just doesn't visit flowers very often. I usually see them at night when they come to my night lighting sheets is when I see them the most often. So hopefully that's not popping up. My state email system keeps popping up on me. Again, there's a lot of true bugs. At least 3 of these 5 here are predators. But the one on the left, even though it's a predatory bug, that's called the orange or the yellow assassin bug, that one is clearly feeding on pollen and nectar. So it's got its face down in the flower. It's feeding on floral resources, even though primarily its diet consists of other insects that it feeds on. So my takeaway message, basically, I want to try to encourage everybody to get out and take more pictures, because the more people are out there taking pictures, the more we can learn. What I love about pictures is I'm not against people collecting for voucher specimens. We need those. We need people to be properly identifying things. We need vouchers to know how to identify. But for me, it's a lot easier to archive photographs than to deal with dead specimens. Plus, they're prettier. My photographs will show you what flower it's on. Sometimes they'll show you a little bit of their behavior, their postures, what it's doing. So I really do like photographs, and I really think photographs are an important part of science moving forward. Plant natives, especially golden Alexanders and mountain mints, I can't stress that enough. Pollinators really need those two plants. They're easy to grow. They're not going to take over your prairie. They're just good ones to have. Learn to appreciate goldenrods. I used to hate goldenrods too, and I don't want as many as I have in my prairie, but they are really important. And so I've got to appreciate that that's where I'm going to go when I'm actually looking to photograph insects. And as always, just slow down. It's amazing what's out there. I did not know, I had no idea how many insects were out there until I started taking the time, picked up a camera, and started basically squatting down and paying attention to what was on all the flowers. And I'm to the point now, my background is plant ecology, and I used to always want to photograph all the different flowers, but anymore, if I see a flower without an insect on it, my eye is looking for that insect. I always want to know what's visiting it, what's it being, how's it being pollinated. Even sometimes the grasses are benefit from a pollinator. So a lot of things, even your wind pollinated plants can benefit by cross pollination. So I think it's just important to know what's out there, and photograph can really help with that. So I don't know if you're familiar with iNaturalist and Bug Guide. If you're not, I love iNaturalist because you can basically enter a photograph of anything. It doesn't just have to be insects, whereas Bug Guides has to be a bug, so a creepy crawly insect related. So you can do spiders and centipedes, things like that. Bug Guide's out of Iowa State. iNaturalist is out of Academy of Sciences in California with National Geographic. But both of them, iNaturalist has an AI that basically gives you suggestions as to, not always right, but it actually helps you with identification. Bug Guide has a really good key because of all their photographs. And so I use both of them interchangeably to basically teach myself how to identify. But through both of them, especially iNaturalist, I've met a lot of other insect experts that you can actually message back and forth, and I can learn. And people comment on your pictures and basically say, it's this species because of this feature. And that's just a really, really good way to learn. So I love both of those sites. So I want to encourage you to basically explore those and get out there. I'm amazed at sometimes people what they can find in their backyard. I have over 2,000 species in my 3 acres of invertebrates that I photographed and identified to at least genus. So it's amazing what I can bring in 3 acres. Now I am close to 2 nature preserves, so I had a source population of these insects. I basically just created an oasis, and they basically were flying around or got blown in here and said, oh my gosh, this is where I want to stay because I offer so many flowers and so many diverse opportunities for them, and hopefully nesting sites, things like that. And so with that, I hope I didn't take too much of your time. I'm happy to address any questions if you like. I will be here. So I can stop sharing so maybe I can see you then.
All right. That was really great. Great presentation. So we do have some time for a few questions. If you want to raise your hands, unmute yourself, speak out. We do have a few in the chat right now. Well, to start, there's 2 questions about what kind of camera lens you use. Really great pictures.
Well, thank you. I shoot Nikon. I got a new camera now. I went mirrorless, but most of these are all shot with a DSLR Canon. I think I've got a D50. I've got a Z, a Z1 is my new mirrorless that I'm using. But essentially, I have a macro lens, and there's lots of different types of macro lens. I like basically a 90 or 100 millimeter or less. I really like to get close to my subject. Some people like a bigger lens up to 200 millimeters so they can take dragonflies and swallowtails further away. So I have to actually get up really, really close to the insects, but I like that. I like getting up closer because I can get a better depth of field when I get closer. So that's just my preference, but I have a bunch of different lenses that I will swap out and use just kind of depending on what the day is. But yes, I'm learning my new mirrorless. I just bought it last October, so I haven't done a lot with that. But essentially, they're basically not supporting DSLRs anymore. All the cameras are now going to a mirrorless, which is just a different. I don't quite understand how they work, but they're different. They're better. They're The one I got has a quick focus, which is really important. My eyesight's not good enough to be able to manually focus, and the insects are not slow enough. They move pretty quick. So I have to use autofocus or I don't get them. I take a lot of pictures so that hopefully some of them will work out. Some people do photo stacking. So they'll take a whole series of pictures and basically stack them together. Now, the insects can't have moved very much. You have to have a whole series of them. But that's what my cameras apparently can do. I haven't played with it yet, but I will learn. My goal right now is not to get, the cover of National Geographic. I want to document the species and the diversity. Even if my picture is not, the best picture out there, if it's good enough to be identified and prove that it's visiting such and such nature preserve, that's what I want at this time. I want to basically document diversity rather than stay there with one insect and spend an hour following this one single insect around. I can't. My brain also doesn't work that way. I've got to move on and find out what's over at the next flower.
Awesome. So another question we got in the chat was kind of sort of answered. Are there some goldenrods that are invasive, such as like Canadian goldenrod?
Of course they are. But I'd like to challenge that term invasive. Like I say, don't ever plant clenata or tall goldenrod. Don't plant them. But you've got to understand that leaving a ditch unmowed here and there, especially where I live, it's rural areas, we do not have to mow our ditches. But if we could just leave some things that would really help the insects be able to get from one prairie to another prairie, just leaving some habitat is so important. I'd rather see a ditch with goldenrod than a ditch with nothing but mowed lawn. So it's a perspective type thing. Is it the preferred? No. Obviously, stiff goldenrod, showy goldenrod, swamp goldenrod, those are much, full field goldenrod. I love that little one. Those are much better because they're not as aggressive. They still attract the same number of insects, sometimes a little bit different, more conservative insects, but we have what we have. And so there's only so much you can do out there. I just want people to understand that even the weedy stuff is currently supporting insect diversity. And that's just the truth of it. When I go out and do butterfly surveys in June, a lot of times the nodding thistle is blooming. I hate nodding thistle. It's a horrible invasive. I don't want anything to do with it, but it's attracting insects. And so when I'm doing a butterfly survey, I'm going to go find that thistle and I'm going to basically photograph the regal fritillaries that are visiting it. Now, would I kill that thistle if I was managing that site? Of course I would. I'd want to plant something else that the regal fritillaries could use instead of nodding thistle. But we've got to understand that's where the insects are and that's where we go to photograph them.
All right. Let's see. Another question that came in the chat. Have you ever learned anything about plant ecology by paying attention to insects?
Well, definitely. I was talking a little bit about milkweed. I think it's really interesting to see the different insects that can actually transfer that pollinia. So we've got to think about milkweed. It's it's important for the larval monarchs, but the adult monarchs are getting no nutrient off that. They're just drinking soda. Essentially, it's soda water for them. It's just a little boost of energy. Only they're not getting a lot. No insect is getting protein nutrients to support their babies from milkweeds. The pollinia is being transferred. So the milkweed's tricking them, and they're basically getting the bigger insects to transfer this pollinia pollen from flower to flower. But it's things like roses, blackberries, things that have a lot of really high quality pollen that actually support the young, that are actually really critical to have. Partridge pea has no nectar. Spiderworts have only pollen. So if you see an insect on a spiderwort, it is feeding on pollen. And that pollen has a lot of protein. Thistles have a ton of protein. They are really important. So we're actually getting part of the DNR to go out and plant a lot of field thistle, which, 10 years ago we were spraying and oh my God, thistles are horrible. They're aggressive. Nobody wants thistle. I don't like to walk through thistle. But if it's in small enough number that I can go around, so I'd walk through it. But go around, it's a really good place to photograph, swallowtails and bumblebees and other types of butterflies. Really get attractant. So we kind of got to work with nature. And for me, the question isn't Is it, is a good plant, is a bad plant, is it native or not? That's my number one question. Yes, Canada goldenrod is aggressive, but it is native. And so I'd rather have Canada goldenrod than I would wild parsnip. Even though wild parsnip is actually really highly desirable by a lot of different insects, I really prefer, I've been called a native plant Nazi. I can defend even aggressive natives, but I really don't like the non-native ones. They just don't belong. Um, that's just kind of how I was taught. I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered that question, but yes, I think we're always learning. Bugs don't follow rules, so it's really hard to make assumptions about what's going on out there. But the more we gather, the more data we collect, the more we learn.
Hmm.
I have a quick question. Angela, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really informative. I have a very small urban backyard. I actually live in St. Louis, so I'm wondering if you have any tips of specific plants or just strategies to use to kind of maximize small footprint to support invertebrates.
Well, the most important thing, which I'm sure you don't do, is don't use Seven Dust. My mother uses Seven Dust. And so she says she loves butterflies, but she will spray all of her roses and her zinnias with Seven Dust because she doesn't like the damage. So the most important thing you can do is to learn to live with a little bit of plant damage. That means your plants are actually functioning. I get into arguments on Facebook, and I need to quit this. Defending my tarnished plant bugs, because tarnished plant bugs will leave little black spots all over the leaves. And so, oh my gosh, it's horrible. It looks like that's what the plant's for. So we put these plants out there. We plant native prairie plants or whatever native plants to attract insects. We've got to appreciate that they're actually doing their function, that the plants are serving a role, the insects are serving a role. Of course, the insect are food for birds. And so if you care about birds, the reason why our birds population is declining is because the insect population is declining. It all works together. And we've got to understand our role in this. But, anything, even just a potted plant, on your back porch can help. It'd be amazing as long as it's kept pesticide free. I always worry about, in urban areas. I live in a far rural area and I have to. I don't people. I'm just not a people-y person. Okay. I like certain people, just not lots of them. Small doses, but yeah, I don't. Mosquito foggers can do a number. Now around here, fortunately, we have ag chemicals, and as of 3 years ago, we were having no planes fly over, but now we're getting aerial spraying coming over our house, and that infuriates me because I don't know. We don't know how to basically measure the damage that's going on. So there's a lot of farm chemicals that are really hammering, and our insects are going off to die. And it's like when a honeybee, hive basically is damaged, you see all the honeybees by the actual hive. For our solitary bees, wasps, all these others, we don't know. They're just dropping out of the sky. Our only number is, they talk about the windshield, things like that. And, there's less insects striking our windshields, but it's hard to quantify that. So we just do what we can.
Thank you.
All right. Another question that came in for the chat is, do the insects choose the highest quality plant for themselves, or do they fill up on less nutritious ones if they are available?
We don't know. I mean, that's one of the things I want to know. Like I said, we've read something suggesting the association between, I'm guessing, thistle and the regal fritillary. So the regal fritillary females basically go into summer estivus. The males all die, and the girls kind of go into a temporary hibernation in the summertime. They come back out in August and September. They feed, hopefully on something with high quality pollen, high protein pollen, and then they lay their eggs. And based on the quality of that protein in the pollen is basically has an impact on the larval survivability. So what we want to do, and Casey wants to look into this, is she's been collecting pollen off of bees. So she collects bumblebees and she uses a little Q-tip and she scrapes the pollen off, goes back to the lab, and they're doing analysis on the pollen to determine, the actual ingredients of that pollen. So I don't have time to study pollen, but we're really interested in that. We're really interested to know, are they actually visiting for a certain reason? I mean, obviously, the more native plants you have, the more opportunity, the more smorgasbord. You assume, you hope that the insects are picking the plants that they need, but who knows? Maybe it's just like humans, some of them don't. We don't know. But obviously, the ones that are actually surviving and reproducing, we hope they are actually choosing the better ones. But like I said, parsnip is not a plant I want out in my natural areas, but they are visiting it because they need food and it's available. We don't have a lot of native carrots that are blooming during the middle of the summer when wild parsnip is. There's water hemlock, there's water parsnip, there's a greater angelica, cow parsnip. Those are found further north. I don't have a lot of those around here. Meadow parsnip blooms early, golden Alexander's blooms early. There's not a lot of carrots blooming. Rattlesnake master is a carrot. I have a lot of that. But basically, sometimes these non-natives are taking the place of some of the natives that we have lost, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But how do we do to fix that? What can we do? Plant more natives.
Plant more natives, yeah. All right, so we have a few more minutes left. And another question that came in for the chat is, when you make iNaturalist observations, do you do 2 observations, like one for the plant and one for the bug?
No, not usually. Now, what I will do a lot, I'm more interested in the insect because we've got other people out there documenting, the floristics of these sites. But I will put in my notes, I will put what plant it's on. So if it's a tack-ended fly visiting rattlesnake master, I will put found on rattlesnake master, in remnant prairie. So I will put that data in the notes, but I don't take the time to go back and post that as rattlesnake master as well. I'm assuming that there's a lot of other people out there taking pictures of flowers without bugs on them that are posting them on there in some cases, but the record's still there. And if somebody asks me to go back, it's just time consuming to have to post a photograph twice. Now, sometimes I'll post the picture as the plant because I want to know exactly what species of plant that insect's visiting. And I'm being lazy and I don't want to get my guide. Or I will send it to some of the top bottom. I'll send it to Paul Markham or Chris Benda and I'll say, hey, what is this plant? What is the species? Just so I can get help and save myself some time. But I don't usually post them twice. I do post sometimes the same insects just because every time I see it at a nature preserve, I want to make sure I'm documenting that is at that site. And so I really want to make sure, and when I'm out there, I don't photograph every single insect every single time I see it, but I do want to try to make sure I photograph every single species of insect that I possibly can. Now that I'm recording, my voice recorder, I'm basically saying, silver spot skipper on rough blazing star, 30 of them and moving on, leafcutter bee, that type of thing. I'm recording that data, but I can't photograph absolutely everything. I wish I could. I wish I was that fast, but I'm not.
Yeah. All right, looks like that's all our questions that were in the chat. So if anyone wants to throw in any last minute questions before we sign off for the night.
The moth on the lead plant. That was the lead plant flower moth. Shinia lucens is its scientific name. So there's a scurfpea flower moth and a lead plant flower moth. Both of them are found at Revis, although the scurfpea flower moth is more abundant. Lucens seems to be a little bit more conservative. What's good about those is they actually, I've got evidence of the caterpillars tunneling in the ground to overwinter, which is a good thing because we will need to burn these prairies. And so I know that when I burn the prairie, I'm not burning up the caterpillars because they're in the ground. And so they're protected by that. So it's not fire that's causing those to disappear. It's lack of habitat. So of course the regal fritillary is basically lays its eggs in the leaf litter near violet. So when we burn, I was really worried about that burn that just happened at Green River recently, the arson fire. That's a regal fritillary area, and I don't know how well they will do because of that. So we may have a serious downturn in regal fritillaries because of that arson fire. We have to wait and see. So if that's it, I'm really happy that you asked me to do this again. I'm always happy to basically spread this message of insects. I want more people out there. I'm seeing a lot of botanists to start taking pictures of insects when they're out there looking at their flowers. And, that's the key because the botanists already know the plants. And so I was always told by all my insect friends that they wish, if there's anything they wish they had, they wish they knew their plants first before they got into insects. So actually that's where I started from. So it does help. It helps me to know where to find the insects because I know the plants already. So that's really helpful. So I think our botanists are really key to help us find some of these rare insects because they already know what plants to look for.
There was one more question that I think Stacy and I were wondering about. You mentioned a nightlight sheet or something for attracting moths.
Yes, I love it because this last year was really hot, and as I get older, I'm not as comfortable being out. I don't like cold, but I don't like super hot either. You get all sweaty and it's miserable. So I like to go out at night. So basically, the concept of night lighting is you basically put up a white sheet and you shine a light on it. You can even use an LED light, just a shop light to start out. But I use mercury vapor and black lights. And I just recently have purchased tents, night lighting tents. So they're freestanding. So it's similar to a dome tent, but instead of being a shell, it's like a crisscross in the center. So there's 4 different panels by which the light hangs in the center. And so there's 4 different panels by which the insects are attracted to. And so the insects come to those different panels, and you can get a lot of people viewing at the same time. And that's what I've been doing. I do that, try to do it twice a week throughout the entire season, as long as the weather cooperates. It can't be really extremely windy. Obviously, wind, rain, things like that. Insects don't like to fly in heavy winds or when it's raining. But if you have those still hot, muggy, miserable nights, those are the best. This last year, I was at Siloam Springs down in Adams County, and I got over 400 species on one of those muggy nights in a matter of less than 2 hours. And I had to take breaks in my truck to cool off in the air conditioning because it was so hot. I was just burning up and basically still got out there and documented 400 species, which is just completely amazing. All different types of insects coming to the sheets at night. And so, it's not as pretty, it's not natural on a white sheet, but at least it's documenting what's there. You basically are causing the insects to come to you. It's a lot quicker to document insects on a nightlight sheet than it is to walk out into the field. A lot of the insects are nocturnal, so you only see them at night anyway. But it's amazing. Sometimes even the bees will get out there at night and come to the sheets. There is a nocturnal sweat bee, which was really cool, found in the sand prairies that comes out to the sheets sometimes in large numbers. And it's nice to see that. I would never see that during the day. It's supposed to be yellow. The thing about the lights, I don't know about the yellow, mess up insects. The one thing I worry about with my night lights, obviously the light is basically messing up with the insects a little bit. So I only night light in my yard once a week. So I night light someplace else and in my yard once a week. And I usually only have my lights on for 2 hours at the most, and then I turn them off. So give the insects a break. I don't leave them on all night. I've heard that, if you stay out there all night, you might see more insects, but I need to get to sleep. And I want my insects to have a break. So I don't leave them on that long. I shut them off. I did have a heat lamp my husband brought out one time to try to use that. And that basically would suck in some of the insects to the heat, and some of them would die in the heat. So I don't like to use that. Obviously, black light is a lot less intense. So I don't think that probably has as big of an impact as far as light pollution, as the mercury vapor is extremely bright. So I don't like to have the mercury vapor on more than, a couple hours, depending on what I'm doing. But I like my sleep. I like to go to sleep. So I only use it, even in the middle of summer. I'm starting at 9 o'clock. I try to end by about 11. Doug Tallamy said use yellow lights. I don't know what he means by yellow versus mercury vapor is more of a blue light. So I don't know what he means by yellow lights. I have to ask him if I ever run into him again. I'd be curious as to what he means by a yellow light. The shop light would be more yellow. Yellow lights from Menards. Oh, I'll have to look into it. To try it out so it doesn't mess up the insects. Yeah. Well, my mercury vapor is essentially just like a regular light bulb. So you can screw any bulb into it. So I could actually get one of those and try it with my mercury vapor setup. I have a portable battery that I hook that one up to. So I could try a yellow light instead of my mercury vapor. It's worth a shot. I mean, I'll check out Menards, see if I can find a yellow light. A project for me.
Yes.
I'm game. I can do it.
Well, I think that might have been all the questions that came in the chat tonight. Very well done presentation, Jella. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, write a note down for myself.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
I appreciate you coming. Thanks a lot.